Welcome to the meeting room out of office from IMEX Frankfurt. My name is James Lancaster, Editorial Director of Energy UK. And I'm pleased to be joined in the studio by Kai Hattendorf, former CEO of UFI, the International Association for the Exhibitions Industry, and now a global roving ambassador for the business events sector. Kai, nice to have you in the studio.
James, good to be here.
Now, you've been active on LinkedIn lately, and I read a piece of yours on tariffs and global world trade. There's been a bit of movement on tariffs in the last couple of weeks, China and the USA coming to some kind of trade agreement. What is your current assessment of the situation, both generally and as it pertains to business events more specifically?
Well, I think generally we have a fast-moving situation where the US administration raised tariffs seemingly as an opening gambit for conversation as to where tariffs will lie eventually. But regardless of whether you're at 145 or 10 or 20 or 40 or 10 plus 10 plus 30, tariffs make things more complicated and expensive. And therefore, that uncertainty about the future setting is impacting trade and therefore impacting trade shows and the whole events industry, as obviously we are one of the most critical channels to market before materials and products actually get produced and shipped.
And you think that's happening already? Are we seeing impacts immediately?
Oh, yeah, I mean, operationally, you heard all the stories about the ships on the way from China to the US that arrived in the harbors and they couldn't unload because the costs of the tariffs were so high. So you have a disruption in the flow of goods, or a delay of the flow of goods, the famous will there be dolls for Christmas in America conversation we are having. And this, of course, also then plays down to all the shows taking place now. Those are the sourcing shows. If you look at the Canton Fair in China, where essentially there were no American buyers.
No American buyers at all?
No, very, don't say zero, but very few. Yeah? And it was noted and reported internationally. You have buyers holding back, and you have producers holding back from producing. So you're seeing an impact on trade show floors around the world, obviously, this spring already.
And more generally, in terms of conferences, business events, more generally, how vulnerable are they to big tariff hikes?
Obviously, there's direct links between trade shows and tariffs. The wider event industry is impacted because there is uncertainty, insecurity, and a lack of trust. If we look at the wider implications of the current US administration's policies, it's all that uncertainty based on individual reportings. Do I get into the country? Will I be allowed to trade in the country? What are other obstacles? And we all know that it only takes a few small instances to damage trust, and it takes a long time to rebuild trust. So you've looked at the data of the Canadians not going south of the border as a statement or out of security or insecurity. The number of association events going north of the border or relocating south of the border. The impact is a cultural one, it's an economical one, and is based on insecurity and uncertainty.
I was talking to a planner recently who said, this is a very specific example of how it can affect a meeting, I guess. She was a medical congress organizer, and she was talking about how some suppliers were having to cut back from sponsorship and exhibiting simply because they were unsure of the situation and that they were exporting to America and being hit by the tariffs. So that's a very specific example, I guess. For most businesses, is there that threat of recession further down the line? Is that another worry for them?
I think recession is a known unknown for us in the industry, right? We got through 2007, 2008, 2009. We got through SARS. We even got through the whole standstill of the pandemic, the recession that caused. Recession we can handle. We've been there before. Now, technically, the US saw a decline in GDP. If that stays for 2 quarters, there will be a recession. This has an impact on slowing trade, slowing economic growth. You have Germany, Europe stalling with the impact of energy prices and the Russia-Ukraine war. You have the unclear situation in the Middle East. You have tensions between India and Pakistan. So there's lots of elements that dampen economic growth. If you look at the latest projections of global economic growth slowing to below 3% this year. So this, of course, is impacting all kinds of business confidences and therefore everything that has business in its name, like business events.
But are you saying that the business events is actually, sector is actually quite resilient to those kind of more sort of macro trends that come and go? And
We are fortunate that a huge share of the marketing spend is into face-to-face formats and into meetings. So when I worked at this very venue at Messe Frankfurt during the 2008-2009 recession, we saw shows becoming smaller because the exhibitors booked less space and brought fewer people. But they were here to do business and fill their order books. So it is one of the last things that get cut. So usually we have an impact. It's not as vast as the wider economic impact. And then usually we are an accelerator on the way out. So the amplitudes are not as high when we go down with the global economy. And we are usually late in going down and early in coming up. So we usually get a compressed time of crisis compared to many other sectors.
So that's how a trade show like this sort of acts as a weather vane or a barometer for the wider economy. Is that what we're saying?
They always do, right? And an easy way to measure the state of an industry is to look at the rebooking rate at the end of the show. If businesses are confident that they will have a good year, they're booking at the end of the show for next year, try to get a better location, try to invest a bit more. So they're really, really early indicator, 10, 11 months out from the next show about the sentiment of industries. Now here at IMEX this week, you have from the first conversations I had, this is day one this morning, many destinations are seeing increased activity from organizations looking for alternatives to bring their events. If they have the US as a potential market and they want to bring 2 or 3 strong bids to the table for the next couple of years, again, based on the uncertainty.
So this is a real opportunity for other regions in the world.
Where there's a market closing, other markets are eager to open. It's always the game, and this floor is full of markets that are eager to look for opportunities if other markets decide to be more closed.
So outline for us some potential scenarios going forward next year, the next 5 years, in terms of world trade and the flow of trade around the world. Do you see more bilateral agreements, perhaps, or new trade corridors opening up? Paint a few pictures for us.
What the tariff policy has triggered is a lot of awareness around trade deals that are under negotiation. Let's not forget you have huge trading blocs like the European Union. The EU and the UK suddenly moved beyond the Brexit. Actually yesterday with a new agreement on more alignment on specific industries opening up to each other. I'm so glad you guys can use the normal line again at the airport, the EU line. So next time you come to the EU, it'll be faster for you. So there's real benefit in for everyone. You look at ASEAN as a trading bloc, and then you see agreements like India, UK, bilateral trade agreements, China, Brazil, where they are bilateral agreements that are based on the strength of respective markets and needs of the respective partner market. And you will see a lot of those taking place, and trade shows go where trade flows, right? So you will see shows in the respective participants of these bilateral deals taking advantage of that growth of trade.
Do you see any regions, Latin America, maybe APAC, or what we used to call BRIC, the BRIC economies, do you see any of those regions in the ascendancy now? Do you see any hot tips in terms of who's coming up?
There always are. It's if you look at India, how it matures as a market with the potential, India is on its own trajectory. It is still very much domestic, but it will open up more to international players. There's huge opportunity. If you look at the GCC region, with the ambitions of Saudi, the maturity of Dubai, and the really, really smart other players filling gaps in the markets and really being successful from Oman to Qatar to everyone else there. There's a lot of growth in that region. And don't count down off Europe. There's a lot of trade show growth in Spain. Germany came back from the post-pandemic situation rather well by now. France is doing well. The UK has a lot of potential. And you see more venue projects coming up in Eastern Europe. So that'll be interesting in a niche market for the next 10 years to watch.
In terms of some of those more developing areas, developing economies, what is the most important factor that inspires growth in this area? Is it just accessibility? Is it just the logistics side of things? Or is Is there a cultural element that needs to be overcome as well?
I think there are three mandatory elements. That is accessibility, that is infrastructure, and that is an ease of doing business. If we have these three, the business events will come, the trade shows will come, the conventions and conferences will come. The destination is an asset on top, the experience. But if you have the service level right, then you're in play. And then it's about essentially the policies of the respective market, which industries they want to grow. So I've been arguing for years, and I'm happy that we increasingly are heard when we make this point in our industry advocacy, that the tourism element of business events is one of 14, 15 dimensions in which we bring value. The economic impact for Frankfurt of a show like IMEX is huge. The societal impact of bringing the world to a destination has a huge impact. If you align your industry policy with your business events policy and decidedly go to attract shows and events and conferences on the industries you want to grow, you bring intellectual capital and intellectual property. There's so many dimensions where business events help you to drive the economical and societal development of your market. And increasingly, from the conversations I've had with many government officials in the GCC region and in Southeast Asia, those markets are going for these assets and try to activate these potentials.
Do you think the advocacy piece is getting through now? Do you think government and policymakers have a better understanding of what this industry is and what it can do for economies?
For every market that you convince, there's another market where you have a policy change and you, like Sisyphus, you go back down and you start again. But the fastest growing economies are interestingly those that activate the potential of business events. You see a correlation there. The mature markets, there you struggle. They have their ways and they have the cultures and the space for business events in an ecosystem. They're local or regional or domestic, very different place. But it's tough to change something where you have a mature market. The growing markets are very aware, and from the conversations I'm having about venue projects and investments in markets that hope to become a fast-moving market, the value of business events and investment into infrastructure and accessibility and service level is definitely understood by a whole array of markets or countries trying to come to market.
In the more mature markets, there's a mindset that still links business events with tourism.
I wouldn't make that connection take the connection as a given, but we've probably been a bit too lazy as an industry and just went with that flow to be fine with being seen as a sub-segment of business travel. I mean, you didn't travel here as a tourist. You didn't travel here as a business traveler. You traveled here because you have business. So it's a business-related travel. It's not business tourism. That's what brings you here. And yes, you're ahead in the bed, and you have an average delegate spend. So you have the tourism metrics. But this is not what drives your presence here. And we've probably been a bit too lazy pre-pandemic in making the wider point as an industry. So I'm glad about the work we did with Jamaica, the Global Manifesto and Industry Manifesto that we built through the pandemic and how that gets updated. And the Iceberg campaign, One Message, Many Voices. We are singing as a choir now, as an industry choir around the world. Some people can sing better. I'm more of a talker than a singer. But as long as we sing from the same hymn sheet, we will progress with the perception. It's painful, it's slow. It'll always be too slow for you to be happy, I know, but we're getting there.
If you were the CEO of a company coming into this market, what can they do to make themselves more resilient to the fluctuations of world trade? What kind of policies should they implement?
I think we'll generally see more and more event organizers, that be they associations for conferences, be they trade show organizers, to move away from putting your eggs in one basket with one big monster event. And there are a couple of trends feeding into that. There's sustainability and travel trend feeding into that. There is the cost of travel feeding into that. So I think we would see more decentralized events being connected, which will bring us back to where we were as an industry in the 1980s, where many media publications started strings of events to add value to their subscriber services. I believe the successful event organizers of the future has a number of small events, one flagship event, and will have a subscription-based service with content in between that links a global community to a brand and has face-to-face touch points in the relevant regions around the world, because it minimizes the risk if one market is challenged that you suddenly have your main asset under threat.
Kai,
James,
thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.